usual topic, but how many of you here have lost someone you love? How many of you have taken care of someone before they pass? We see a lot about the losses that people have as they age. At hospice especially, we get folks when their doctors have determined that their health is no longer doing well, that they are actually considered terminally ill, which means 6 months or less to live. So we see a different progression with every type of disease, with every person. It's unique. But we also see that the caregivers are struggling. It's not uncommon that we'll see a 92-year-old woman taking care of her 94-year-old husband. And she's bound and determined to do it because she's done it her whole life. And we want to make sure that we're reaching out to those people as well as reaching the people who may be patients. If you can start at the first slide. Well, for those who aren't sure, Southwest Hospice, our mission is that we exist to provide quality and compassionate end-of-life care to terminally ill patients and provide support to their loved ones, which also includes bereavement support. So we can go ahead. And hospice is not about just the medical. How many people think that it just focuses on just the medical, what the body is doing? Are we just about our physical being? There's so much more to us. We have our mental, emotional, social, creative, all these different aspects to our being. And with hospice, we take all of that into account. When you come on service, they're going to find out about you. We're going to have a nurse assigned to you for those physical aspects. Also a social worker who's going to be looking at how you're doing, looking at some of the needs of the family. It might be beyond what you would think. It may be, oh gosh, they don't have enough food in the house. How do we help them with that? It might be they're having trouble navigating the VA healthcare system. So we need to help them do it. Have they done an advanced directive? How many people here have done an advanced directive? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's very few people really take the time to do that. And that is going to bring you so much peace of mind that we encourage everyone to please consider doing that. We have a chaplain who's going to look at the spiritual needs of that patient. And when we talk about spiritual needs, it could be that they belong to a particular faith, or they may be someone who engages in nature or just has a lot of questions. And if they decide that they'd like to maybe have a rabbi or priest, he'll make sure that that priest or rabbi is notified and set something up with them. We also have CNAs who will come to the home, and they're going to be providing some of the personal care, making sure that they get bathed, taking some of that off of the patient's families. They're going to do some light housekeeping sometimes too, when it gets to be too much for the caregiver, or providing respite. And I mentioned before about the volunteers, and they really are the heart of it. We often find so much more about the patient through the volunteers because they are there just to listen. And that social aspect that they add to it is priceless. And we've had volunteers come back with stories of, we had one volunteer that the patient was a younger man, and he asked if he would teach the sons how to mow the lawn and do some other things because he could not do it. And so he was able to do it. Another volunteer helped a woman write her book that she'd been working on and got it done before she passed. There's a lot of these things, these unfinished business that we can help them with. So there's the other end of it too. What happens once the patient dies? Then it goes into bereavement. And if you'll turn this on, there's a lot of confusion about the terms bereavement, grief, and mourning, but bereavement is the entire aspect of the grief and mourning experience. And it doesn't always have to be about a death. It can be the loss of something important to you. Well, grief is the internal feelings that arise from the loss, things that you may not see, but they're feelings. Where mourning is the outward expressions of grief, such as crying. It could be wearing the color black. There's all these things that different cultures do to kind of show the grief. When we look at the grief, there's many different kinds. There's what they call conventional, which really there is no such thing as conventional. It's all very personal to each person. There is disenfranchised. That's where the loss is somehow minimized. You might see it with sometimes when a person has a miscarriage, people will say, well, that's okay. You can have another one. You're young. You'd be surprised how many people have had that said to them. The loss of a pet. Sometimes that is their only companion. And folks will say, oh, for goodness sake, it's just a cat. And this is very, very hard on the person who is grieving. That is where perhaps there's other feelings like guilt that are brought into it, like death of a child, suicide. These can all be very complicated and take longer for someone to work through. Layered. As we age, we have a progression of losses usually. So we know the patients will see maybe their mobility is gone, then maybe their hearing, their sight. It's just a steady progression of losses. But as we get even older, we see we've lost many people in our lives. And so it's not just the one person. It's now, oh, look, I've lost one brother. Now I've lost my sister. Basically, I've lost all of my siblings now. So that adds to it much more difficult for somebody to just work their way through. And it's called anticipatory, which is just what it is. It's before anything is lost, but you're starting to think as a patient, for instance, what if I'm not going to be here for the birth of my grandchild? We had all these plans for when we're going to do it. Now we're not able to do it. The caregivers or the people that love them have those same anticipatory grief situations. And what's going to happen? For the patient, it's always what's going to happen to my family? Who's going to protect them? Who's going to continue my work? For the family is how are we going to get by without them? Now, how does grief impact us physically? This adds to all of our aging. How many of us here can say, yes, we had fatigue during taking care of our loved one? How much sleep did we get? When they're awake, you're awake. Some people will have nausea just from the stress, insomnia, worrying, aches and pains that they just can't explain, lowered immunity. When you're so stressed, you're not getting the exercise, the nutrition, your immunity is going to be compromised. And we can often see a weight loss or weight gain. Mentally, loss of identity. What happens when you lose a child? You're no longer a mother or father. You've lost that piece of identity. Your spouse, you're no longer part of a couple. You're not a wife or a husband or a partner. People are often fatigued, disorganized, confused. I know when I was taking care of my mom, it was really amazing how much more difficult this was because I was so tired. I used to run a Red Cross chapter that had huge disasters. I was up for 4 days straight with one of them. Far easier emotionally than taking care of my mom. and my 5 older sisters who had to comment along the way. So there's so much more going on besides what people see. Time distortion. They'll either lose time or it just seems like this is never ending. When you've lost somebody, the toughest time they often say is nighttime, when they're used to having them there and doing something together. We see stress from extra duties. When someone passes, then your partner usually has to take on whatever duties the loved one had. Financial concerns, systems navigation, things that person used to take care of are now on you. And then there's the unpredictable emotions that come with grief. Everybody has heard of the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the 5 stages of death. Well, they don't exactly go in order of stages. It looks more like this next slide. That's the stage of grief. Okay, one minute you're doing fine, the next minute you're angry at things, and then you're back to being okay. It just bounces all over the place, and people find it difficult to understand why. I thought I got over that. Or you might do something where you block everything, try to block your feelings. You're not supposed to cry, you're supposed to be strong. I did that for my mom, and it wasn't until about a week later when I went to the grocery store and started grabbing for a bag of Cheetos that she always had to get her. And I suddenly realized she's not here. I just burst into tears in the middle of the grocery store. Didn't expect that. And that will happen to so many folks. Can I get the next slide? Social isolation. Now, for patients, they often will start withdrawing too at the end. And we'll find that for people who are grieving, they often just need some time alone. They want that, they will do this on their own. But we also see that friends and neighbors are with grief. They don't know what to say. They're afraid they're going to say or do the wrong thing. And we can tell you the best thing you can do is show up. Just be there. You don't have to say anything. Just giving them your support and your presence, that is what is important. You'll see sometimes too that people will lose relationships based on the person that died. Say it was your husband's friends from work. You went together as 2 couples and went to things. He died. Now you don't get calls from them as much. Or your child was on a soccer team and used to do things with the other soccer parents. You don't do them anymore. They stop calling you. So next slide. But we all have to learn how to live in the world without that loved one. And Hospice provides free grief support groups and grief counseling to people. And what we really want people to understand, this is how, not just for us, but how we can help other people to understand that grief takes its own time. You never get over the loss of that person. And it's true what they say, the deeper the love, the harder the loss. But we can help people move through it. Please don't let anyone tell you how you should feel. And that includes yourself. For me, I thought I had to be tough. I had to get this done. And if I didn't do it, who would? But please, be good to yourself and recognize those triggers. I mean, who knew that Cheetos would be mine, right? It was my mom, but there it was. For most people, though, we're looking at holidays. Holidays are often the really most challenging times because people will do events together. They have traditions. So we'll often see our grief support group really grow during this time of year. Anniversaries, birthdays, really tough. So you may notice your friend getting really quiet, and then you start to realize it was the anniversary of their wedding, or maybe even the anniversary of their death 2-3 years ago. hope people will realize that you don't have to be alone in your grief, to please reach out to get help. And one of the best things is to try to turn to your families and friends for support. You realize this can be hard. How many of us have a hard time in asking for help? It's really not easy for some of us. It's really difficult also for the person who needs the help to put into words what they need. When my mom was dying, people say, what can I help you with? I'd go blank. And so what we have to try to do is think about specific things. If you know them, say they're neighbors. Ask if you can mow their lawn. Ask if you can pick up their groceries or prescriptions or something. So find specific things that you can do for them that you think would help them. And the more you do that, the more they're going to start honing in on where they need their help. Draw comfort from your spiritual beliefs, that helps center them. Some people meditate, some go to nature. Writing down your feelings in a journal. This will help people come to realize exactly what they might be feeling. Try to maintain your hobbies and interests. And especially as we get older, we sometimes let things go by the wayside. Or even me, while I'm still working, I keep saying when I retire, I'll finally do something with all the crafts in my room that I just keep seem to push off, but keep buying more. But keep those things. Keep trying to enjoy those things. Remember, quality of life is what we're talking about. For those holidays, think about creating new traditions. Hospice started one last year. We put up a tree in Pony Village Mall, and people are able to write the names of their loved ones on doves, and we hang them on the tree. And it's free to do this. So it's something where they get to include that loved one in that holiday time frame. Volunteer for a cause that is important to you, or maybe it was important to the one who passed. And you notice I still use those euphemisms. A lot of times in our culture, you don't like hearing the word death or died, but those are perfectly good words to use. Then talking to a therapist or a grief counselor, that's very important too. If you're not moving forward where you'd like to be, then consider that or join a support group. And like I said, Southwest Hospice has 3 grief support groups, and you're all welcome to come. Next slide, please. And we have a licensed clinical social worker that has been doing grief studies for over a decade. She's extremely bright and has been doing since COVID. We did a lot of phone calls for grief counseling because people couldn't get in or didn't want to be around other folks. So she also created a very extensive library with books and articles on grief, and it covers a lot of different situations. Next one. So that's our Light Up a Life ceremony. It'll be in November at Pony Village Mall. And next slide, please. We also provide a lot of public education. So we have presentations about helping friends with serious or terminal illness, advanced directives, grief in the holidays, and our volunteer training class. That's a 16-hour class that explores the experience of death and dying. And people in the community are welcome to take it, even if they don't become a volunteer. But it's taught with the help of nurses and social workers and the chaplain and others. So you hear from the professionals. And then we're going to be resuming the Care for the Caregiver classes. We did those before the pandemic, had to stop, and now we're about to restart them. And in the back, you'll see on the table, there's a caregiver resource guide. Please help yourself to that. We created that when we realized there really wasn't anything out there that contained all the different resources. And of course, it's never up to date because there's always something new, like the new tribal health center that opened up this morning for the grand opening. So we'll be adding those to it, but those are free to anybody who needs it.
They got a van. So what did they do? Called on their granddaughter to drive them through.
Hi, I'm Amanda Fugate-Moss, writer and producer.
I'm Timothy Patrick Murphy, songwriter and composer.
Driving the Daisies is a dramedy musical that explores what it's like to lose independence and have to rely on others as we age.
Fun, authentic, and very bold, Driving the Daisies tells the tough stories of aging, disease, and loss of independence while using humor and music to keep the audience engaged. It tells the real stories of these dismissed generations through our eyes. We have a strong vision about this project with a lot of stories to share. We know what it can accomplish when it comes to fruition. We have a lot of interest, but we still need your support to make it a reality.
My inspiration for the show was Ernest Thompson, Norman Lear, and Rachel Bloom. I was honored to take care of my grandparents, that's them, full-time for 2 years. The greatest lesson I learned was how truly difficult it was for them to lose their independence and have to ask for assistance. It got me thinking that there's just so much that we just don't understand or we can't relate to because we haven't gone through it yet. Things that when shared with the public can help us all to have a better understanding of what's involved in the aging process. Many shows make reference to the older generations, but they gloss over the real health issues, while focusing primarily on the youth. Representation like this is very difficult to find on TV.
When you contribute to our campaign, you're supporting a woman-driven show made up primarily of older cast and crew that uplifts and supports the voices of the aging generations of men and women going through the aging process right now. Driving the Daisies tells their stories through their perspective while raising awareness within our society without judgment.
A dick-a-dick, a dick-a-doo, a dick-a-dick-a-doo. I used to be able to dance. I can't dance anymore.
Thank you so much for helping us bring Driving the Daisies to fruition.
Driving the daisies all the way back home.